Good morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you may find yourself. And welcome to Beyond the Bins, a podcast that explores the various ways that we, the human species, are navigating a rapidly changing world as it relates to the environment, sustainability, conservation, ecology, and more. My name is Laurel. Here, we'll share stories, ideas, and pose questions about modern man's relationship with the natural world and where to go from here. When conversing with people about environmental action, I sometimes hear something along the lines that it feels like whatever they do is pointless. It's an understandable feeling, really. The problems we're faced with are massive in scale. Rising sea levels from climate change threaten to displace millions of people. There's threats of biodiversity loss and mass extinctions, etc., etc. I'll post a few links in the episode's descriptions to some examples of what we're facing, but the details of what we're facing isn't what I want to spend the episode talking about. Anyways, what's worse is that it too often seems like the powers that be, the various government entities, large corporations, people who have the kind of influence and resources to do anything meaningful, have little desire to do so. So yeah, these feelings of paralysis are quite understandable. So here's the question for the day. Is it all pointless? Well, let's start by telling a couple stories. In the book Collapse by Jared Diamond, he outlines some challenges posed by sheep grazing in Iceland in the Middle Ages. Starting roughly in the 800s CE, people from Norway and Denmark started settling Iceland, and they brought sheep with them. Raising sheep in Norway and Denmark had been viable for a long time and presented few environmental problems. However, Iceland's volcanic soil was more easily scattered, and the ecosystem wasn't used to the presence of grazing sheep. Sheep grazing led to mass soil erosion, and the settlers had to decide what to do. They could have taken drastic measures, like stopped grazing sheep altogether or even abandoned the island. Instead, what they did was they put limits on how much sheep they could graze in certain areas at certain times, and people have been grazing sheep there ever since. Here's another example, also from the book Collapse. In pre-modern Japan, under the Tokugawa shogunate, which lasted from about 1603 to 1867, there was a large population boom, which led to increasing demands for wood. Wood was used in a wide variety of ways, including construction, heating, cooking, and industrial purposes like making salt, tile, and ceramics. Wood was also burned to make charcoal to make hotter fires for smelting iron. This, combined with increased agricultural expansion, led to deforestation, which was a problem for this isolated island nation. The 1657 Meraki fire, sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, which burned 60 to 70% of Edo, now known as Tokyo, and the need to rebuild afterwards exposed the country's growing timber scarcity. Fortunately, before they lost too many forests, the shogunate implemented strict regulations on tree felling followed by tree planting and farming endeavors, and were able to avoid catastrophe. Here's another story. Before electricity became widespread and oil and petroleum gas became one of the most commonly used sources of energy, people used a different source of oil for lighting. Know where that oil came from? Just in case you couldn't tell, that was supposed to be whale sounds. But yes, once upon a time, the night was illuminated by whale blubber. According to a 2023 article from The Guardian, when whale populations were dwindling in 1859, a Pennsylvania farmer discovered oil coming up from out of the ground on his farm. Even then, the transition from whale oil to petroleum was not instantaneous or seamless by any stretch. The transition happened slowly over the century that followed, with technological developments in both oil drilling and whaling taking place, and also economics playing a critical role. In the end, people decided that whales were worth saving. So, my answer to this question is no, it's not all pointless. And the reason it's not all pointless is because we've been here many times before in the history of our species. Human societies have been running into various challenges posed by how they interact with the natural world since time immemorial. I only listed 3 examples among what could likely be thousands of stories. We are facing challenges that are, to say the least, large in scale, and we could be in for some rough times ahead if we don't start addressing some hard questions. Not just about where our energy comes from or what our stuff is made out of, but about how we relate to the earth and each other. And it's possible that no matter what we do, some things might never be the same again. Still, sustainability is an ongoing process. It's not like you can just slap some solar panels on your house and start composting and call it good. And it's not like as a nation and a global community, we can decarbonize our energy grid and say that everything is going to be just fine forever. When it comes to sustainability, change really is the only constant. So I'll conclude this episode this way. Asking what you will do as an individual citizen, consumer, or whatever to solve the problem doesn't seem like quite the right thing to ask, does it? Instead, I'll leave you with this question. What will you do to help yourself and your community, whatever you consider that to be, to navigate these tumultuous changing times and to guide us towards a better future? This episode was recorded on the traditional homelands of the Ute, Diné, and Pueblo peoples. If you're enjoying what you've heard, like, subscribe, follow, whatever it is you're doing on YouTube or whatever podcast outlet you're using. You can find me on Blue Sky, where my handle is @BeyondTheBins. That's Beyond, THE Bins, all one word. You can also find me on Facebook as Beyond the Bins Podcast. If you have thoughts that you would like to share or questions, I would love to hear them. Feel free to leave a comment or shoot me a message on one of the aforementioned social media outlets. Until next time, thank you for listening and take care.